In most religious households, children receive some form of religious education, whether that comes in the form of church attendance, family scripture reading, or just casual discussions of theology. In many, but not all cases, children are taught their parents' theology as fact and given the same religious label. This is the norm, at least in the US, for religious households. But how do parents and teachers who hold no belief in a deity educate kids about matters of theology and philosophy? During my time at Camp Quest, Texas, I discussed this topic with two of the camp's directors. Now, both of them are parents who are raising their kids in a very different way from the average religious household. Also, as camp directors, they have experience educating kids on these topics. The three of us can't speak for all atheists because atheism isn't a worldview or belief system with set principles and practices. But what we discuss here, I think, are a lot of practices that are used by a large number of atheist parents and teachers. We also discuss a bit about how these practices are worked into the programming of Camp Quest. I hope you enjoy.
I really choose not to, mostly because I don't believe that we should be defined by what we believe, because that's something we do, that's not who we are. I did take my daughter into a parade once, and it was like born atheist, but that's just simply a label that says that she was born not believing in something. And that is something that we have to be very careful of, and not to define not just our children, but not ourselves as this is what I believe or this is what I don't believe, because that's not what makes us who we are.
I don't really think I label any of the campers anything specifically. With my specific kids, I know what they are, I know what they claim to be. It's not specifically about atheism or labeling the kids anything specific like that, but it's mostly about free-thinking kids, however you want to call it, just the ones that are open and kind of think for themselves.
Both David and Jamye say that they're not particularly interested in labels for their kids or campers. Their teaching isn't predicated on the belief that the kids they're teaching should take a certain label. David mentions that the only labels he uses for kids are the labels that they take themselves. This indicates that he allows them the opportunity to ultimately choose their beliefs for themselves. Jamye brings up the point that we should be careful about putting labels on others, as well as ourselves. After all, labels don't really define us. Our identities are comprised of far more than just our beliefs. David and Jamye, like many atheist parents, allow their kids to explore their identities far beyond the confines of labels.
The biggest thing is that you want to teach how to learn, not what to learn. And most of my teaching focuses not on content, because especially in the technology and digital age, the content is always there. The content is easily available. I mean, you and I both carry around the accumulated history of humankind, and then some, in our pocket. And that's something that some older generations might not realize, that we have access to all of that content knowledge. And that content knowledge changes and grows all the time. And so instead of teaching our kids that X, Y, and Z is factually correct, we teach our kids, well, a lot of people say X, Y, and Z, and how do we analyze that to see if they're correct or not? Or how do we know that this evidence is factual? And how do we separate our biases, and teaching them, how to kind of unpackage the world around them, I think is a lot more important than teaching them our version of the world. And I don't believe that we should be teaching our children what to think or what to believe or what not to believe, but rather teaching them how to think critically and allowing them to make their own choices and allowing them to gain those problem-solving skills so that they can kind of unpackage the world at their own pace and in their own time.
Most of our educational stuff isn't specifically about religion, so we talk about science things, fossils, stuff like that. That's just education. Anything that we have that does deal with religion, it's just an informative thing. We have something we do, world religions, and they just talk about what these different world religions believe. It's just kind of informative. We don't reinforce that later. A lot of the times the subject just doesn't even come up. If any kind of religion things come up, most of the time it would be during the Socrates Cafe, which is more an interactive thing for the kids to go through, and whatever involvement the adult has is only in moderating. It's not in answering questions or informing or teaching or anything like that. It's just about letting the kids explore their ideas about whatever subject it is. A lot of the times that's kind of the basis of what drives people to lose their religion, is once they learn how to think, they start to realize that that the whole top-down authoritarian belief first idea that comes through with religion just is kind of faulty. Sometimes it's harder to teach them how to think, because how to think is not a simple thing. It's not even necessarily innate to us. It's something that you learn.
Atheist parents often focus on teaching their kids how to think rather than what to think. They teach their kids how to analyze claims, how to question authority, and identify logical inconsistencies. When they do teach about something controversial, like religion, they often present information from multiple sides and sources, and allow their kids to use their critical thinking skills to discern truth. This type of teaching allows for kids to do something that I think is absolutely vital and relatively unique to freethinkers: question their parents' and teachers' credibility. See, teaching a child how to think is great, but it still depends on the authority of the parent or teacher in question to be accepted in a young child's mind. However, if you encourage the questioning of any and all claims, especially those that an authority would make, then you allow a child to think independently from any system of thought they may encounter, including those of their teachers and parents. It also allows, in the case that those teaching the child are wrong about a few things, for a child to unashamedly identify those flawed beliefs and steer clear of them. This way, ignorance is not passed down from generation to generation. Now, I'm not saying that free-thinking kids never just accept ideas because their parents or teachers do, but I challenge anyone watching this to describe a better way of teaching children without indoctrinating them.
I have experience with raising very young free-thinking kids, and I think one of the challenges is when you raise kids to question authority, they question your authority. And that's one of the hardest things, is you're raising these kids to be strong and powerful and assertive and critical thinking, and then as a parent you want them to obey you and you want them to behave, and you want them to have these kind of social skills, and those two things in a 5-year-old are kind of competing against each other, because you're like, I want you to go to bed. It is bedtime now. And it's like, I would like to re-examine this concept of bedtime. And I do believe that we will be re-examining the concept of bedtime tonight. We can talk about it tomorrow, but right now you are going to go to bed. I'm not sure that you have the authority to send me to bed. Like, I do indeed have the authority to send you to bed, and you are going to bed. Well, I think that my time would be better utilized by reading. Well, you can read tomorrow, but right now you're going to bed. So I would say the biggest challenge of raising free-thinking kids is that you have kids that are going to question your authority.
The challenge is you have to deal with helping your kids go through being alone or being outcasts, possibly. I've actually been kind of lucky with both of my kids. The groups of friends that they've been involved with have actually had quite a few other free thinkers, and they kind of ended up finding that themselves, even in the South and even in Texas.
Jamye admits that it's difficult to raise kids that both question everything and are also obedient when it's in their best interests. It often forces a parent or teacher to provide solid, well-stated reasoning for their opinions and directives. But is that such a bad thing? If everyone ensured that they had well-reasoned beliefs and consequently well-reasoned teaching methods, wouldn't all of society benefit? David makes a different point. It's difficult to raise kids that have different beliefs from or lack certain beliefs of the majority. In many areas, including the part of the US in which David lives, atheists and freethinkers are often looked down upon. Certain beliefs are decidedly defining characteristics of some people, and if you personally reject those beliefs, then a lot of people may feel that you're rejecting them. This is a huge obstacle of interfaith friendships. Luckily, though, the number of secular young people in America is on the rise, so we can probably expect for being a secular young person to get a little bit easier as time goes on.
I would say more religious parents lean towards the authoritarian style of teaching where something is wrong because it's wrong, and that's because I said so, and you don't want to do the wrong things because you're going to get in trouble, and you don't want to get punished, and it's kind of an authoritarian thing. I'm very much into teaching them the effects of their behavior and why things are wrong, as opposed to the idea of there being punishment or consequences. So that's something that I always worked really hard with my kids and with the campers is you teach them why it's wrong, how what they're doing affects other people, how they would feel if what was happening to them or what they were doing were to be happening to them. And I think it makes a better person. They can use that in more situations than simple just following the rules.
I don't have a ton of experience with various religions, but only the religious household I grew up in. I would say that I look at discipline differently. Coming from a kind of spare the rod, spoil the child background, we don't believe in physically disciplining our children, preferring a more type of social or consequence-based discipline. That is, we're going to take away privileges rather than physically spank them. And I'm not sure. I mean, I know atheist parents that are advocates of corporal punishment. So that's less of a atheist versus religious parents difference than just some parents do this and some parents do that. But for the most part, a lot of it is, if you don't have an answer to a question, it's not that God did it. It's that let's find out. Like, let's go through the process of finding out these things that we don't know. And we try, at least in my family, a lot more to do how do we find an answer to a question we don't know, and being able to freely admit as a parent when you don't know something, and not having that kind of catch-all of, God did it. Like, where do rainbows come from, or magnets, or what have you? It's not God did it. It's, there's a much more interesting answer there, and I might not know, and so how do we find out?
Both David and Jamye articulate in different ways that their teaching methods don't lend themselves to simple black and white thinking. Specifically, when it comes to discipline, both of them choose to educate in the consequences that they give, rather than just try to deter undesirable behavior. As David said, they rather teach why things are wrong rather than enforce rules for their own sake. They both also emphasize that they don't always have the answers to their kids' questions. When they don't, they utilize the critical thinking skills that they taught their kids to take the journey toward the truth with their kids. In many religious homes, certain ideas about discipline, about roles of authority, and ultimate truth are untouchable, sacred. Many atheists reject the idea of sacred beliefs, though, and purposely create a home where even they can be questioned.
Part of the problem that we're facing in education right now, and as a public school teacher, I could speak to this idea of multiple choice education. If we allow our kids to step outside of those boundaries of the ABCD box and say, there's more answers than this, and there's more positions than this, and there's more opportunity than this, then we start to raise our kids to think that there's alternative answers to the problems that we face. And if you're willing to be you, and you do you, and that will provide, instead of A, B, C, and D, we're looking at A through Z, and there are people out there that can help solve your problems without having to resort to looking for, God, Allah, any of the various Hindu gods, Buddha, right? Like we don't have to follow one of these. And I've actually had students that said, what God do you believe in? And it's like, well, it's not a multiple choice world, and I don't have to, that I don't have to pick A, B, C, or D.
How I was saying earlier about, a lot of religious people teach through authoritarianism. A lot of religion doesn't necessarily have to be authoritarian. Religion can easily be, teaching people the whys, because the whys of why things are wrong. Yeah, there's not a direct conflict between teaching the whys behind something and religion. So, if we could all come together and teach the whys instead of just the do's and don'ts, then we could, that's something that we could have common ground on with religion, and it would be better, even if religion stays around, I'd rather have religious people that behave the way they behave because they understand the consequences, as opposed to people that behave the way they behave because they don't want to get in trouble.
Jamye emphasizes that we shouldn't put our kids thinking in a box. After all, not all answers are already known, and not all problems have been solved to the most satisfactory degree. Therefore, we shouldn't force our kids to pick one answer out of A through D. We shouldn't force them to take one position out of A through D. We should allow them to think issues through on their own and follow the truth wherever it leads them. David calls for all parents and teachers, religious or not, to teach the evidential whys behind things that we call wrong. Many secular parents and teachers already do this, and it would be great if we saw people from all belief systems come together and teach the next generation good reasons, not unquestionable orders, for what they should do and what they should not do. I would argue that the common theme of atheist teaching and parenting is avoiding dogma. Contrary to how I, a former Christian, was brought up to believe, atheists simply don't teach their kids that there is no God. They just equip them with critical thinking skills and allow them to come to their own beliefs. To conclude, I'll have David and Jamye explain a Camp Quest activity called Socrates Cafe. I think it really reflects how many atheist parents and teachers encourage their kids to learn.
Socrates Cafe is a fantastic opportunity. I actually use it both here at camp and in my classroom at school, and it allows students or campers an opportunity to share their knowledge and to ask questions, and it promotes an inquiry-based environment where they're asking questions that don't have oftentimes an answer.
Everybody sits in a circle, and the moderator takes names of the people who want to comment next. The people are supposed to either answer the question or ask a new question. Typically it tries to go through the Socratic method, but in practice sometimes people answer, sometimes people ask quite more questions, but it's a chance for the campers to discuss with each other a certain topic and to get to the root of it. And
I've always been shocked at how deep some of these conversations can get, even with 8-year-old kids, when you ask them, like, what is justice?
You'll have younger campers that can even have the deeper conversations, what is life, what does it mean to be natural, stuff like that, and they'll have really interesting takes. It becomes a pretty interesting discussion between the campers.
Thanks for watching. I've been Drew from Genetically Modified Skeptic. You can always subscribe to my channel and I'll greatly appreciate it. You can also follow me on Twitter at GMSkeptic. And until next time, everyone, stay skeptical. Oh, and here's a clip of me getting pied in the face by one of my campers.
Oh no! Ooh, okay, I'm carrying you off.